Okay, hello everybody. It's 3 p.m. Central European time, and I'm happy to have my two fellow colleagues, Mark and Ulrik, on board. And may the force be with us that we manage all the tooling to get this webinar up and running. And I will leave over to Ulrik to do the presentation as we go further, and then we will open up for opportunities for you attendees to raise questions in the GoToWebinar panel. And by the end of the session, we open up for where you can actually have online conversation as well. So please bear with me, and Ulrik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frederick.
Actually, I need to both. I'm going to push change presenter.
Yeah.
And present to myself.
Yes.
In this case, I will show my screen, and we will then jump over to Ulrik, if that is okay, as we are moving on, if that would be okay with everybody.
Brilliant. So, I mean, you, Mark, have been set to be organizer, and Ulrik had the opportunity to be presenter, and I will be listening. So you have the full control. Started.
Okay, perfect. All right, welcome everybody. We are having the session today on architecture next steps. We will explore that both from the traditional BPMN perspective, as well as the perspective of enterprise architecture and specifically information architecture. For that, I have asked my colleague, Ulrik Foldager, to participate. Ulrik, if you could very short introduce yourself, if that's okay, just that the colleagues out there, also the colleagues in Sweden and worldwide, actually know who are we, what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mark. My name is Ulrik Foldager. I am 43 years old, and I live in a small city called Helsingør in Denmark, just about 40 kilometers north of Copenhagen. And me and Mark, have been working together for more than 12 years by now, I think. And we've been working on innovation and transformation projects for both public and private sector organizations all over the world. So we're used to traveling a lot. So what I do, I am hired by leading practice. That is my employer, and I'm officially working as a process architect. However, I cover a lot of other subject matter areas. So I work in and dabble in quite a different bit of subjects and topics. So and then also I am the project leader of the development of Enterprise Plus, which we will take a closer look at a bit later in this presentation. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Ulrik. The reasons I asked Ulrik to participate is as a process architect, he will be also able to show us the link between normal process modeling and architectural disciplines like enterprise architecture and information architecture. And that's exactly what we want to explore today. So we will, in this case, he will also demo it literally, and I asked him to do his examples not only in models, but actually in a tool to prove the fact that they are right. Because slideware can be very patient. We want to be able to see it in real-time solutions. So having said that, let's jump right directly into the to my own introductions, which is very short. I will not spend a lot of time. You see here, I do a lot of standards development. I'm specialist in the field of patternicity, which is the science of finding meaningful patterns. I do a lot of authors of books. I wrote both the Business Process Management Handbook in 3 volumes, so it's I'm very heavy reading. Also the SAP implementations of how to implement SAP, and multiple other writings. So I do research in various pattern things, in workflows, information patterns, and architectural patterns, and semantics, which is one of the subjects we will be discussing. In that case, I'm actually the chairman of OMG, In this case, I was part of also developing the BPMN standard. So very good work, good stuff, but that does not change the fact there is components missing today of an advanced world. So let's jump directly into it. I only have one slide of what are we and who are we. Leading Practice is actually an enterprise and industry standard organization. It's founded in 2004. And in this case, what is it they do? They do best practices, industry practices, and leading practices, which in this case, leading practices is the name, which comes from patterns of outperformers. So we study what organizations do, and then actually say this is the most common way of doing it or the best way of solving it. So that is also things we will be presenting and discussing today. First thing we will be discussing is the difference between modeling and architecture. Why? Because we cannot show solutions if every one of you, if you are a business analyst, a process modeler, and you want to do the solutions based on your process models, it will be difficult. And we will also discuss that. Why is that difficult? So then we will go into the relationship between enterprise modeling, in this case process models, and enterprise architecture. In that context, we will discuss the status of enterprise architects, the hot topics that exist, some of the domains and some of the semantics and how to go about it, the artifacts. That's a basic thing that we will do. But somewhere along in the presentations, we will literally jump to a system. Why? Because we need to be very practical and to the point. So having said that, let's jump in. First, about modeling. In general, the discipline of modeling. Enterprise modeling is the abstract representation and the description and a definition and a structure of something existing in the real world or something you want to create. Basically, if you draw a chair, it is a model of a chair. The chair on itself is something that is physically. Obviously, therefore, it's an abstract representation and a description and definition, and obviously it includes structures. So, enterprise modeling disciplines is in service models, process models, business models, value models, rule modeling. We also have reports, strategy management. You find modeling, for example, the strategy map or balanced scorecard. That is a modeling discipline. Then you also have ITIL is actually a modeling discipline. You take the entire IT application service lifecycle. That was ITIL 2. ITIL 3 is the aspects of the service lifecycle. How does IT service the business? That's a model, in this case, a service lifecycle model. Also, COVID is the discipline of modeling, even though COVID goes into governance standard, but it is governance modeling. And BPMN and BPM notations are a form of modeling. I hope that this described very short, because that's the way we want to go through it. What do we mean by modeling when we talk about it? Therefore, so the question arises, all right, if that is modeling, what is architecture? Enterprise architecture, well, basically, while it does abstract things, both conceptual model, logical and physical relationships and things, here's the most basic description of architecture. It puts things into structure and context. So does building architecture, so does solution architectures, so does gardening architecture, landscape architecture, so does actually enterprise architecture. It puts things into context and structure. Why? Trying to not to make the world so complex in order to manage the structure. Here are examples of various enterprise architecture solutions that exist today: business architecture, process architecture, value architecture, data architecture, and what we want to discuss today, information architecture, and in the context of overall enterprise architecture. That at least sets the scene. So now the question arises, so what's the connection between modeling and architecture? Now, well, in the outside world, if you're talking construction architecture, it's something totally different. But basically, it's the same principles. You have models and you have an aspects of an architecture that puts things into context and structure. They do relate, but how do they relate? Just in the real world, it is exactly the same thing for the enterprise. It relates based on the objects that are involved. In strategy modeling, I model the strategy, but I could also put a strategy architecture. It's not done so often. It is seen in the market, not so much. Why? Because most enterprise architects come from technology. But that is a part. You can do a value architecture, and a value architecture would include the following component: strategy, goals, your critical success factors, most likely also how you would want to measure it, and possibly the strategic business objectives. What is it you want to achieve? And if it's very good architecture, how it relates to your competencies or your functional areas and your functional groups. That's what a value architecture basically would include. A data architecture includes the data components, data entities, data services. It also includes aspects of your data tables and other components. Obviously, this is a representation. So between enterprise engineering, enterprise modeling, and enterprise architecture, what we're trying to say is, what is it that they have common? All these objects, all of them. But they do different things with it. And believe it or not, even though you might say, oh, this is too basics, about 95% of all organizations we meet do not know how to handle this on a very basic level. If they would know it, they wouldn't have the problems they have today. For example, if you are looking, they are doing totally different disciplines. Enterprise modeling looks at business model, value models. They look at process models, meaning process notations. They look at performance models. So in this case, this is performance measurements, performance management, but they also look at service models. And they look also at information models. But even though it has a connections down here to information architecture, most organizations haven't related their information models to the information architecture. And most organizations haven't even related their process models to process architecture. Not even, and business architecture is quite far away from having a relationship to BPMN. And the information architecture is the worst part. They should have a relationship. Why? It is my processes that I automate. So my information architecture has a direct relationship to my process notations. But most haven't done that relationship. So what we're trying to say is, what they have common is their objects. In process world, these are the objects we are talking about. Process areas, process groups, business processes, process steps, process activities, event, gateways, process owners, process roles, and by the way, multiple others, like process rules, process measures, process security, process compliance, etc., 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 etc. Obviously, we kept it here for simplistic things as an example. We will go quite detailed as we are moving on. So today's world has the need to combine enterprise process modeling disciplines over to architecture disciplines. The today goal is actually to show how to use it together, but for that we needed to understand the most basic, and that is, well, what is it they have common? That is the objects. And it is through the objects that I am interlinking them. There is no way other to do it. If you do it through your artifacts, which you can, you have to also do it through the objects in the artifacts, which we will show later on. We will literally demo some examples of that. So let's jump directly to the things, because right now I would like to discuss a little bit the status of enterprise architecture and what is it today that matters in these organizations. If we are looking, we have done a business and enterprise architecture research among close to 1,800 CEOs and 3,000 business leaders, and we asked them, in this case, we asked them what is it they are doing in their enterprise architecture program. And we asked them, what about in their business architecture, information architecture, your integration architecture, your security architecture, your infrastructure architecture, etc. And here's the answer we got. 3% feel they have their infrastructure architecture in place. Why? With the digital transformation they are doing, they suddenly feel and see themselves faced with totally different challenges. They feel only 12% feel that they have implemented only a small part. 31% say they have a moderate amount, have implemented a very large percentage, and 80% say we think that we have actually implemented all that we wanted to do, which is very interesting. We have about only 56% here we are seeing who have either implemented nearly all of what they want or a very large percentage, which means, oops, we have 44% who are on the scale of saying, we actually don't think we have addressed this very, very good. So let's go to the next, security architecture. Obviously, that's a little bit worse because here we only have 43% saying we feel we have addressed either most that we want or we a large percentage, which actually means very scary. 57% of organizations are literally saying we have either not addressed it or we have not only implemented small parts or we have only a moderate amount of what we should be doing. Obviously, cybersecurity has become a totally new perspective as organizations are entering to the where they are actually transforming the way they are doing based on digital innovation and digital transformation. They are changing their business model, they're changing their service model based on the potentials of technologies, leading that also actually the application architecture, which used to be the one that had the highest maturity in organizations, has just suddenly jumped back to only 35%, where organizations feel they have either what they need or they have a large percentage of it. Obviously, that impacts the integration architecture, and what not a surprise, it impacts much more the information architecture. The information architecture sits at the center of all of this, and therefore has the highest percentage of what hasn't been done. What will not be a surprise to anybody if the above things are not in place, obviously the business architecture is also suffering. The business architecture have had an immense amount of beating to endure because all of the other things were not in place, and many enterprise architects don't know how to communicate this in business architecture, don't know how to translate it over. What does it mean to the strategy? What does it mean to the service model? What does it mean to the aspects of the performance model? So it has suffered immensely. Let's look a little bit. What is it actually the executives and the businesses want to do in these subjects? They prioritize the business architecture to be most relevant at the moment. Why? Because they are saying we need to have a link to strategy. It needs to link to our strategic goals because we need to improve the competitiveness as a part of our digital transformation. We need to link to the business model as a part of our innovation of digital innovations. We need to be rethinking our service model. That's where literally the innovation and transformation hits it. We're not talking only about product innovation. We are talking about the aspects that it needs to change the way they are servicing the market. Therefore, they need to link it to the critical success factors of the organizations because they have defined certain things to be critical. And it needs to change the operational excellence. In this case, this is many times they are working with aspects. This is a TOGAF meta model. It also says here, please note that. And you see here multiple objects, but please note, can anybody see Here, the red components here on the left, you have drivers, goals, objectives. Can you please note, it doesn't even have an object for strategy. So no wonder enterprise architects today have difficulty to linking to the strategy. It doesn't even link to aspects of critical success factors. I can also not link to trends or forces that are happening in the market. So most enterprise architects have very difficulty to linking what we just discussed. And I'm not criticizing here. I'm not criticizing TOGAF. I've been part of developing TOGAF components. I actually wrote the paper defining the profession of the business architect for the TOGAF group. So please, I'm not attacking here anybody or anything. I am stating purely what is it we need to be able to solve the things that are happening at the moment. The market is moving faster than our frameworks or methods, which is, by the way, the reasons we are having this call, and you are taking the time to listen to this, because obviously I hope you have better things to do. So, second part, information architecture. What is it they want with the information architecture? Well, they want to see how are we using our data? How are we doing our data integrations? How can we achieve aspects of be compliant to open data law? How can we improve our decision making? How do we improve our business flows? When I'm talking business flow, process flow is a part of that, but they also want to improve the service flow. Now, please note, I know a lot of process people out there, they will not know the difference between a service flow and a process flow, and they will say, yeah, that was not fully right. Then please visit a hospital. In a hospital, you come down, you swipe your social security ID, and with that, they register you, and there's lots of processes involved in that. And then they actually have an information flow. If you want a scanning, it needs to be there, and somebody might come if you broke the leg and pick you up. That's a service flow. There's processes involved in that, but there is in a hospital multiple service flows. Why? They are a service industry. So yes, process modeling works, and process modeling is important, and information modeling is important, but in this case also service modeling. And that's point number 5. Today, nearly all organizations rated service flows improvement as the #1 thing of why to do information architecture. And we ask about 2,000 CEOs and about 3,000 business leaders across all sectors and industries. So obviously it also needs to do operational excellence, lower risk, improve flexibility, etc., etc. If we look at some of the others, the integration architectures, obviously to improve the data insights, information flows, business flows, service flows. Why? Because 3 supports 2. If you look at application architecture, it will link to what we just discussed, because it needs to be focused on robotic process automations between multiple components. And that's where we link process modeling with information modeling. But now comes the worst thing. That's another analysis. If some of you are interested in this, please send me an email. We will have the email in the end of this, and we will also upload the presentations. You will see it, but that's another subject we see organizations are fighting with. Suddenly we have robotic process automations team, and they are not interlinking and building it on the existing process models. Meaning right now we are creating a new silo that is hurting immensely both our process modeling world and our information architecture world. And why are they doing the application architecture? They need to cut cost and they need to standardize, which is also cut cost. So next one, security architecture. Whoa, wow. That obviously supports all of that. They need to be compliant, they need to lower the risk, they need to protect the organizations, they need to strengthen the robustness, they need to improve the risk management, and they need to be better at parts of the governance of all of this. The security architecture therefore has become the enabler to be compliant and to govern the rest of the things, obviously. So let's come to the last component, which was our infrastructure architecture. which obviously interlinks all the platforms, the infrastructure services. We standardize, we consolidate, and we put the things in the cloud. Why? Digital transformation and innovation. The organization has changed. It is not only anymore about platform components, infrastructure components, platform devices. Yes, it's also about that. But that was the architectures of the past. So, having discussed what is happening in architecture, the question is now, how in the world are we enabling this? Because here's the challenge. All these domains, here's how they are working. This is TOGAF, the architecture development method. It starts with business architecture, then it goes into information system architecture, then it goes in technology architecture. As they found out you can't work that way, they actually proposed to say you revisit some of these components. But some of the organizations today, they get a platform device like a smartphone. It needs to be connected through a role into services and into informations. So it's D, then B, then C. Oops, that doesn't work this anymore. So suddenly it's proposed to work in this way in architecture, which is also a very difficult way. So architects have difficulties following the way they should be working based on what we are discussing. It was just to give a perspective of the difficulties that are faced out there. So the difficulty is you need to be interlinking the business layer with the information layer and the technology layer. The business layer, however, consists of both value aspects, service aspects, competency aspects, capability aspects in the competencies, and your processes. The information layer is looking at aspects of your applications, therefore your information systems, your data, your platforms, and obviously also your infrastructure. Now, this is an architecture component. By the way, this is an architectural model, which is also the reason it says enterprise architecture below it. Each of them works with totally different objects. The value architecture works with these objects. The service architecture with the service construct of the organizations, the business services, the service flows, the service rules, the service channels. If you are looking at aspects of your competencies, then you are talking about your enterprise capabilities, your resources, your actors, your culture, your business objects you have, your products, your contracts, your locations, your channels that you're going out with, and your organizational rules and your compliance aspects that needs. Let's face it, most architects don't even know how to link to these things. In some of them we have. Same thing we as process modeling people. What do we have of this? Well, we have the actor and the role as a user, that's it. So it starts to become that many of the things that is needed today is not very good interlinked. In process world, we are mapping processes, event gateways, process flows, and process rules. In application modeling or in application architecture, these are what you have. There they talk about application tasks, information objects, the system flow. And by the way, just in the case that process people and architects have difficulty to understand this, a system flow is not the same thing that the process flow is. The number one reasons that an architecture does not become good or an implementation takes so long is because we are using our process flow as the system flow. In about 60% of the time, it's very well. If you are manufacturing, if you are in the high-tech industry, perfect. Your system flow is more likely with 99% chance. And this is more metaphoric percentage I'm mentioning. Most likely, your system flow will be exactly the same way the process flow is. If you, however, are a hospital or the healthcare industry or multiple other service industries, your system flow will with 95% to 99% likely not be at all what your process flow is. So then you obviously have your data flows, and your data flows is obviously based on your data entities, your data tables, your data services. the various data channels and your different warehouses. I know you know that, but we still need to bring it up. Why? Because when we talk about information architecture, we have to consider both the information flow, which follows the system flows of your applications, and your data flow. And we also have the process flow. So we have three different things working across here that we need to be interlinking. We need to be understanding how they interlink and how they work together. Obviously, the platforms are on top of that. There's platform services, platform rules, platform devices, meaning smart things, bargo cannons, scanners, etc., within the platform devices. So, and we have obviously the infrastructure, which is the technology layers. So let's look at how all of this fits together in a way, and let's start with a BPMN model. I'm going to give over here right now. I'm going to see if I manage to give over to the presenter, change presenter. I'm going to give over to Ulrik. There you go. Ulrik, I'm giving over to you. If you could actually show your screen, we're gonna, for the rest of you, here's what we're doing. We're going into a tool. The tool is called Enterprise Plus. It's a tool we have in our community. So this is nothing. This is not a sales presentations we are doing, because in our community it costs less than a visual license. The reasons we are demoing it is to prove the point what we are discussing of how we are going. So Ulrik, if you would go in, and by the way, you can see here in the start, the modeling software has the following. It interlinks the following. If you go a little bit lower, so we see some of the text, it interlinks the modeling standards of both value modeling notations, but also strategy modeling. But you can also do policy modeling or process modeling or rule modeling, or you can do your blockchains within it of data models. So obviously it is compliant to BPMN, which you see here below, but it also does business architecture notations or information architecture aspects. So therefore we choose to show it in a tool to prove the point that this is not slideware. So Ulrik, let's go into the aspects of a BPMN model. Let's do the first thing.
I'm going to go up here, so just instead of not only focusing on knowledge management system, which is another application component of Enterprise Plus, it basically consists of two major application components. I just want to bring that up here in the first place. We have the knowledge management, which is about documentation and documenting the work you're doing during your modeling journey. And the software tools is where you actually create your objects and your models, etc. So if we jump straight into the software tools under my models, you can see the models that I have on this profile here.
And for everybody else, while Ulrik is loading his models, please note that it is true life that we are demoing it, but we are doing it so over our go-to meeting. So obviously we have the limitations of being able to show it here. But the interesting thing is we have chosen to show it on the example of financial markets. If some of you have difficulties of saying, I don't know how this would relate to my industry, we could literally write us an email and we are happy to show or send you some examples. How does this fit to healthcare? Or how does it fit to manufacturing? Or how does it fit to a city or a government? Because obviously it fits in a different way, but the discipline on itself is kind of the same. Hence, this is why we are presenting it. Okay, Ulrik, that's very kind. So Ulrik, he opened up a BPMN model. This is a very standard BPMN model. So you see on top here, you see a customer, he's doing a customer purchase order, and it goes to the account manager, to the organization, and there is an employee. So it's very, very standard. In this case, the thing that is a little bit different in here is, if you remember, that this is mixed between BPMN and also robotics process automation. So like if you could focus and actually show the robotic process automation. You have here robotic process automations, and therefore also very robots and enabled things. So this is not only the aspects of normal process modeling. And therefore, everybody please note, do you see the difference? Some have a blue line, others have a black line, the third one have an orange line. The orange line goes here to, like if you zoom into it, just for us to see a little bit of what is happening here. Exactly, the check stock levels is an automated process, which we actually already see. That's an automated task, which is very standard in BPMN. But then it actually goes over to an information flow because it checks against an inventory objectives. While it is still an automated task, which obviously we are seeing on the notation, like if you show it, it's on the working wheel. That's an automated notation. Exactly, we have, and then it goes down. Now it checks against the inventory objectives. There it has an objective, and it also has a measure to it and a report. So obviously you see it's a little bit more advanced notations and modeling, but it's a standard BPMN layout, but it's more advanced modeling because it includes robotic process automation. But let's leave that for a second. So we go out, if you zoom out again, like from the model. So besides the fact that it has RPA in it, this is a standard BPMN model. Every one of you has some of those more or less at home. Like if you could go to the customer on top, I see that's actually an information object. So could you zoom in on that first? So if I have created and I have put a customer, in this case, a customer obviously is an actor. We all know that. And from a BPMN model, it would be a user. But I understand that. But nonetheless, he was the one who triggered. Let's see what he did, Ulrik. I think he triggered the order. Yes, exactly. The customer has a customer purchase order was triggered, and the customer order corrections requests also goes to the customer. So that makes sense. In this case, what is different is here it has interlinked it to the customer that it is an information object. Please note this can happen. Can a customer who is an actor also be an information object? Yes, actually in all industries, everywhere. So let's make the worst case example. Let's take healthcare. Why do I take healthcare? Well, government and healthcare or defense are some of the most complex industries that variate by anybody else. All other industries have more or less some of the same modeling disciplines, well, except insurance. That's quite heavy as well. But let's go back to here. Even in healthcare, in electronic healthcare records, the customer, which in this case is a patient, has to be, while a patient is an actor, it's a very specific person, the role of a patient is a role. But in electronic healthcare records, the patient has to be an information object, and it has to be kept at a certain age in order to be handling it. It's just to make the example of the proof of what we're discussing. So Ulrik, could you please go to the customer, actually the information object? Because in the second you actually have that in a model, I want to see what this is. Please note that Enterprise Plus is not only like a graphical representation creating view, it is an object-oriented tool that has semantics in it. So in this case, you will actually see it goes into a navigator of saying the customer is an information object, and in this case, it doesn't have any class types. It could have class type, it could have stereotypes where you could have said, well, I have patients, I have this, or you would do, since it's an information object, it actually is linking it, you see, to big data, to aspects of human name, but that's the semantic relationships. We will go to that later. We will go to that later. So Ulrik, the system on itself tracks where the customer is in. Ulrik, could you show me other models that this is in? So let me zoom here. Don't click on anything, Ulrik, please. I have an information architecture that I have it in. I have an information and data classification I have it in. I have a UML data sequence diagram. I have a data classification, a data service model, and a data model. Ulrik, would it be okay if we go into the information data classification? The second one, yes. So we go to the model. And there you go, everybody saw it highlighted. Actually, this was the object that is in. Now let's look at here. Obviously in financial markets, they take customers, and now we jumped into information and data models from a process model. Please note, and I will literally show you how to do this in a second. And it's, by the way, the system that identified that there is a link between the data or the information and data model and the process model. This is not done by hand. The system does that. And that is what I'm saying, that would be a requirement. Why? You can never change the fact that the process modeling teams works for itself. The information teams work for itself. The robotic process automation teams, they are dedicated teams. They will be working in their silo, and so does the information architecture team. It is our methods and our tools that is inadequate to the fact that in big organizations we are working in silos. I believe it is too ambitious to think and hope that all information architectures and information models are totally handily interlinked to all process models. We would never be able to keep that up to date, and we would never be able to actually, to no mind would be able to do that. Please note, now it says here that the customer has a link, it has a name, it has a demographics, it has an address, etc., etc., etc. I guess everybody, that makes sense. So it actually said how you have interlinked informations and datas. I hope that makes sense for everybody. If you are a process person, this might be new for you. If you are a data person, this will not be new for you, because, or an information architect, this will not be new for you, because you said, oh, very nice. This is how information objects and stereotypes are interlinked to aspects of the data, which is the second, the third, and the fourth layer, until it becomes date and times and codes and etc., etc. Meaning it goes from metadata and master data literally into data types. So, Ulrik, could we go out of that and actually go back to the object of the customer? Could you find that in your object list? I want to leave totally this. I want to go back. We were in the BPNN model. I actually want to go back to the object of just the customer. So if you go under my objects, exactly. You will obviously have a lot of objects here. Don't search, don't go through all of them, because every one of them will see, oh, that's a lot of different things. So don't go through them. Yeah, exactly. You did what I hope that you would do. We will be searching for it. So now it looks at it for the entire repository. It does a query through all the models and all the objects and all the classes, and tells me here, oh, I have customers information object, I have customer payment methods, I have customers also as a data object, very nice. I, however, also have customer addresses, I have information tasks, I have actors who are customers. That makes very much sense. And by the way, this is what you expect from a tool, to be able to search it and find it across all. Ulrik, could you choose an action to the customer? If you push action, and there we should be able to see, here's what I can do with it. I could be looking at my possible relationships. Oh, that's very nice, because that gives you your architecture, because this is not only an object-oriented tool, it is a semantic-enabled tool. So if you could just push, just for the purpose of this, possible relationships. We will come back to the same view later on, but just if you could push possible relationships. I want to see what could I do with the information object of the customer. What does the system tell me at the moment I can do? So it obviously opens up right now. It searches through all of its object and tells me, this is what I can do with it. I can relate requirements to it. I can define a value proposition to the customer. I can define quality aspects. I can, somebody has put risk things into it. So I can relate risk, security, measures, reports, time aspects. How long was, if he's a patient, how long was he in a bed? Or how long did it take us for us to deliver the things? But it can also relate it, please note here, it can relate it to a product. It can relate it to a channel. Like if you go a little bit lower, much more lower, more. Ah, yes, it can also relate it to, please note everybody sees here, it can relate it to a process and an event and the process flow, which by the way it was, because that's where we found it. And it can be related to a process rule, but it also related it to aspects of the information flow. I hope that makes sense for everybody. So like if you could close that just for the purpose of going out, because this only told me right now, what can I do with this customer? Let's look at the hierarchy, Ulrik. If you could give us an object hierarchy, it actually shows me my hierarchies of where and who has been using this. So I am seeing the customer is used in a demographics, where it has human names, where it's the name used, there is text to it, there's codes to it. Wow, oh, that's very nice. Is there more, Ulrik? Yes, there is more. It also looks at it from an aspect of an activity. Which activities is done? Which address does the person have? Further on, it also relates it to an aspect of a unique identifier. Okay, let's proceed. Yeah. Oh, it's very nice. It also says, actually, is there a healthcare number on this? A social security number? Is there a source, or where did we get the unique identifier number? So very nice. So whoever has modeled this has put this information in various models. Please note, in various models around the customer. So, like if you leave that away, if you go out here, yep, if you close that, and if you actually show me object usage, I want to see where is this object used of a customer. Oh, so it actually tells me it is used in, oh, that's very nice. It's used in robotic process automations in a customer order case. It is actually also used in UML. It's used in information models. It's used, wow, it's used in various different wins. Could we go, if this is okay, Ulrik, to the information architecture? Because then we proved the fact that we had the link to the information architecture, yes? If you could choose that and go into that. And then in the very end, I want to be able to jump from my information architecture, Ulrik, over to my process model. Again, proving the point of why we actually are having this entire session. Is there a relationship between BPMN models, enterprise architecture, and information architecture? The answer is yes. Which one? It's through the objects. If you are doing that, you can be able to work multiple artifacts. You can be creating your process models, but it should also be creating informations for your information models. So here we saw the customer. Oh yeah, you're actually showing here it also has a relationships to the service architecture and to the competency architecture. Does it also have a relationship to the value architecture on top? Yep, perfect, very nice. So it actually states how this fits together. Let's go down again back to the customer, to the information architecture, because that's what we were interested in, Ulrik. And if you zoom in into the information architecture, so in this case, the customer is obviously interacting with the financial market infrastructure application role, obviously, because in the second they are in the system, it's an, and please note this is obviously for banks or stocks or stock exchanges. In this case, the customer is an application role. When they use that and when they do it, they can access an information model, an information function, an information role, and the information role and in the information systems and services, etc. But the information role also relates to other aspects. Like if you go up to the information role a little bit higher, yeah, just higher to the model, show us a little bit more what's on top of the model. Yes, the information role and the application role both interlinked to the organizational role. Very nice. So, Ulrik, if we go back to the customer, just for the purpose to stay with the customer, it should be able, based on what we just did here, to interlink. Could you go from this model? Could you click on the customer again and edit the object? I want to actually see if we can jump from an architecture into the BPMN model. Yes, that one.
There we go.
Very nice. It actually jumped to it. We are now in the BPMN model and it also highlighted it. So, can you create interlinks between process models and information architecture? Yes, you can. You can do it actually with any kind of object. And I actually now want to show how you are doing it. We're going to create a totally new object. We're going to do that the last 3 minutes, and then we're going to open up for some questions. Ulrik, could you please create a new object or a new instance or pull it in? You are literally take some of your objects and put in a new object.
Yes. So which object would you like to create, Mark?
Yeah, so you are creating an object. Let's say we are creating, let's create
we can create a
new process.
Access. Okay.
So we are creating a new process. Perfect. And we will call the process, let's call it system interaction, or no, let's call it something else, check order. And let's make sure to make it unique. Don't push save yet. Let's put a number behind it that we know it's ours. Let's just check order and let's put a number 3. Yes, you save it.
Want to create another object? Just that one?
No, that's okay. That's the one we want. We don't want to create one more.
Okay, so now we're going to place the new process object into this canvas here, so that we can create a relationship.
Enter sales order. Let's go a little bit more down where you can put it in. So you have it, yeah, you have it there. It's a check order perfectly. You can set it in under the employee perfectly. And you set it in between enter sales order that there is a check order from the employee.
Whoops. That one.
So all we want is that we are putting it in between.
Where did you want it?
Yeah, just between the customer. So where you are at the moment.
I'm at the employee swim lane.
Yes, exactly. So let's just, for the purpose, we don't want to create all kinds of flows. We know we can do that. Let's save the model. Good. And now we leave that model and we go over to our information architecture. So you save this model and we just go to a totally different one. And we also set in the customer, in this case, an organizational role. Yeah, go up to the organizational role.
Pull in the process.
And you put in, he will check the order exactly. And you interlink it.
Go into the general, pull out a connector.
Good.
Set it to 2 points.
Yeah, and you are relating it to the organizational role.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's just, so all right, now this is merit. We will go out. Actually, now, if just when you saved it, Ulrik, could you just check for the purpose? Could you now click on the check order? Could you click the edit object on the architecture one? I want to see if the system, and that's the proof that there is interlinks, if the system automatically, oh yeah, it recognizes there is a link over to the BPNN model. Did everybody see that? That's the importance. That is what you expect today from tools. You have to expect, if you as a process modeler, or you as an information architect or a data architect have to do all of this manually, let's face it, we won't get anything done. And we are not moving anywhere in this world because our world is getting more and more complex. Companies are investing millions in digital innovation and transformations. We are increasing our process works and we are increasing robotics automations. We are increasing systems and informations and technologies, and organizations are trying to rethink their service model to it. So now let's go to that model. We'd like to prove, to actually do the testing of our pudding that we created here. Even though it was very quick, I can jump right now from my architecture. Voila. It recognizes it and it knows it's in my process model. So our time is up actually, but we want to open up right now for questions. Are there questions or ideas or suggestions or other things? Because I know this is just an hour and time flies when you enjoy yourself. At least we enjoyed ourselves. But let's open up for some questions here, because I'm sure you will have some questions, or at least then it's good enough. So are there any questions? Actually, the speakers, do I need to allow them to? I don't know if that's possible. You can also post them in the questions in the below. Okay. If not, I don't know how to unmute the attendance, but it is what it is. Are there anyone who actually has other questions? If not, I think we will see that that is good for today. And we will give over to Frederick. Frederick, if you have some comments or closing remarks.